The sun, our source of life. What relationship do we have with her? My name is Lynn Zebeda and I'm happy to welcome you here on behalf of Pakhuizen Zwijger and the Solar Biennale to the part 3 in our series of four solar talks in which we highlight a different aspect of the solar revolution every time, from the personal to the social, and this time it's about the environmental aspect of things. So how does this solar revolution that we envision relate to nature, to the earth, and how sustainable can we really make it? Solar energy. So I'm excited about this conversation. Really happy to have you here. Welcome, welcome. How are we? Great. Okay. Sunny, even in the dark. Yeah. Fantastic. I'm not going to wait any longer and introduce you to our first speaker, our first of four, actually. And we'll listen to presentations. There will be opportunity to ask questions in between as well. And we'll have around 15 minutes here with us at the end for a conversation. So we're going to kick off with the first speaker and my sidekick for tonight, Rubiem Anders. And Rubiem is a strong advocate for the sustainability transition. She was the founder and co-director or director actually of Sungevity International, a leading home solar company. I'm sure many of us have heard of it. She's also the co-founder of several foundations, the School Rooftop Revolution, Social Housing Tenant Revolution, and most recently, the first solar orphanage in the world, Zon Next, it's called. So give her a warm round of applause. Here's Rubiem Anders.
Thank you very much. Is this working? No. Werkt die? Of hier?
One, yeah.
Deze? Beter. Okay, sorry. Thank you very much, Lynn, for that amazing introduction. I'm trying to get to my slide presentation. Yes, okay, thanks very much. So today I want to talk to you about a topic that the industry doesn't like very much, which is the shadow side of solar energy. But first, a little bit about that rooftop revolution. Then I highlight the dark side, but of course we'll come with solutions which are there at hand. And then hopefully you leave this place with a solid idea of what you can do to help the right side of supporting fair solar. So which of the people here have seen the movie of Al Gore, The Inconvenient Truth? Okay, there's typically a generation gap, but everybody's seen it. So Al Gore, everybody probably remembers this picture that you see here, which is Al Gore was trying to show the relationship with CO2 emissions in the air and the temperature rise. And the lines that you see over a long time is centuries long of CO2 that's just sort of lingering at a natural quantity. And then it comes to the last century and you see that CO2 is rising and the temperatures are rising. And he was trying to show the world in 2006 the extent to which the temperature was rising, and he needed a crane to do that because it was rising so fast. And then he also came up with a solution, and here he could not get a crane to show you what the solar solution actually could do. So this slide shows you, he got a little bit clever about it, about the extent of the solar market growth just in a few years, and this is the example of the Chilean solar market. Now, if you look at solar as a solution, as a market, we've really emphasized for a long time that we need to accelerate solar by making it cheap. By making it cheap, we can make it available for countries that cannot afford it, like Chile. And that really worked. So the German government did a subsidy on solar, and that really triggered the Chinese to start producing. And we've been very focused as a sector on making it cheap, cheap, cheap. And by making it cheap, we made it big, and that we achieved. Because now I think we're on our way to supplying over half of the world's energy needs in a few decades by solar energy. So that's a success story. But unfortunately, there's also a shadow side of this. And this we call the dark side of solar. Once wrote a article about this, and this is the cartoon that the FD, the Financial Dagblad of the Netherlands, made, and it actually shows a little guy with a recycled whip, recycled out of his sandals, and he's whipping these Uyghur people that are manufacturing solar. And this looks like a joke, but it is true. And unfortunately, these people in China have not only been put into the mines to win the ingredients or the necessary raw materials for solar, but they also put forced labor into the factories. The other dark side of solar is this. There's a little film. Bear with me. It's subtitled.
Burgers en elektronica allemaal weggooien. Dat komt in de containers op de Milieustraat en wij halen dat allemaal uit elkaar. Nou, als we hier zien, we zien wasautomaten, we zien drogers. Ja, en hier bijvoorbeeld, nou, daar gaan ze, zonnepanelen. Zonnepanelen die nu al heel veel worden weggegooid, waar we iets mee moeten.
Want nu gaan ze door de shredder.
Nou, dit is nu geschredderd zonnepaneel.
Dit wordt dat.
Ja, dit paneel gaat de shredder in en dan komt er, als het vermalen is, dit als product uit.
Oude zonnepanelen kunnen niet gerecycled worden, dat is nu te duur. Dus gaan ze de shredder in. Vrijwel alle kostbare grondstoffen gaan verloren.
Nou, dat is natuurlijk iets waar wij als industrie onze ogen voor hebben gesloten. Wij zijn daarachter gekomen en het goede nieuws is, er zijn alternatieven. Dus er zijn een aantal bedrijven, het zijn er meer, maar hier Exasun en Solarge, Nederlandse bedrijven, English, Dutch companies that produce circular solar panels. So on the left one, you see a very light one from Solarge, and it's actually some of the raw materials are recycled frituurvet. What is that in English? I don't know. Frying oil or something. So that's the good news. Now, we've also done at Sungevity, we founded an organization, and that's called ZonNext. It's the world first orphanage for solar panels, secondhand solar panels, because about 20% of the solar panels that are now offered for recycling, they actually are still of very good use. Their life is, they're less than 10 years old, and solar panels, they last for about 30 years. So at the moment, some are even new and unused. They're just recycled in the way that you saw. They call it recycling the industry, but it's downcycling. And after it's been in the shredder, it ends up in a piece of concrete. So at Sungevity, we said, well, we can't do this. So we started this solar orphanage, and we've had amazing success. We started last September, and we had an explosion of attention of this. Over 400 or 500 people send a request for secondhand solar panels. We've been making installations in the Ukraine to power field hospitals with secondhand solar panels. We're powering schools, councils, housing cooperatives, helping people that live in energy poverty to have secondhand solar panels that we have refurbished and we have certified. And this is done by people with distance of the labor market. So it's really nice, a really nice solution, goes really well, works really well. So finally, what you can do, and it depends on who you are, but there's no time to ask. But if you're a market player, then we really need to start looking at solar from not just something cheap price, but also what is the societal value, and try to limit the damage, but also maximize the societal value of it, like the ZonNext panels. If you already have solar, then please leave it on your roof until we've squeezed every last kilowatt hours of it, and don't offer it for recycle until it's dead. If you have a naked roof, then go solar, but please give a chance to the beautiful circular solar panels that are now hitting the market very soon, and we'll hear more about that later. If you're a tenant, ask your housing cooperative to go solar, but go circular solar. And last, please, everybody, change your mindset to think about solar, the societal value of solar, and join what we call the Fair Solar movement. So thank you very much for that super quick presentation in 7 minutes. Thanks for your attention.
Here at the table. Thank you for that. It was quick, but it was great. A lot of thinking in 7 minutes. And you'll stay with me here the whole episode. So thank you for that as well. So we can really use this as the foundation for our conversation. And Yeah, I was curious, but you kind of answered it in the last slide of, like how do we truly prevent that this beautiful solar revolution in the backstage causes a lot of pollution and exploitation. I mean, I can imagine that a solar orphanage like you started is fantastic, but is that the solution at scale, or which of those things that you highlighted do you think is the most important? What should be the priority?
Well, it's not a solution at scale. I mean, the solution is really to start first designing products in a circular way. So with the mindset that those products come back. It might even be not at the end of the 30 years lifetime, but maybe after 10 years you can give a little upgrade and then put that solar panel back. So that's the real solution. Then there's no recycling, then there's no waste.
Yeah, so really the cradle to cradle thinking about solar panels.
But at the same time, we do have, 80 million solar panels in the Netherlands in a couple of years that will be offered for recycling. And they're
How many?
80 million. And there will be, they'll be offered on the recycling. And we only recover a third of the recycling comes to us. And we sort it and we give the useful ones that are still good a second life. Now, 2/3 in the Netherlands are sent straight to the shredder in France or in Belgium.
Wow.
So first we need to make sure that we look at all products, not just solar, any product that we toss to see if there's still a second life potential in it. But in an ideal scenario, we won't be existing because in like 10 years or 5 or 10 years, because then we'll have recycling facilities in the Netherlands that can even the old generation conventional solar, we can pull apart and we can reuse those materials to make new solar panels.
Yeah. So indeed, like the cradle to cradle design of solar panels. Anything else that you feel this is really crucial? Somebody needs to change this.
Well, the problem is always, and we'll talk about more later, that there and this is the frustrating thing about the whole climate discussion. There are solutions. The technical solution is there. And how do you get people to choose that right solution, the solar with the societal value? And it's this market with the pressure on price. It's when we speak to housing cooperatives or to councils and they tender, it's always the price. They have some other criteria. But if, for example, the government would say, well, on all our roofs, we make sure that we have solar panels with a low CO2 content or are recycled or circular design.
So better requirements.
Then you start a market. Yeah. And if you have a market, the price will come down and it will be affordable. Because at the moment we sell solar, we offer solar to our customers, our Sungevity customers, solar panels designed with circular ideas, like REC solar panels. But they're twice as expensive. Mm-hmm. So very few people
will actually go for that.
Go for that, unfortunately.
And you briefly mentioned at the beginning this idea of rooftop revolution. Can you say a little bit more about that, why that rooftop thing is so crucial in a lot of your work?
Yes, well, I personally fell in love with the solar panel 30 years ago. And I sort of I was determined. I saw all these roofs, naked roofs, and I was like, this is such a beautiful technology. So for us, the rooftop revolution is my personal mission, but it's also the mission of my company and of the whole industry, is just get here on Pakhuis de Zwijger. By the way, they have a very nice system here on the roof. Mm-hmm. Look out over Amsterdam and just be blinded by solar. You can't, it's just unacceptable to have roofs without solar because we should all live on sunshine. Now, at the moment, they're still pretty ugly, but some are, and there's still a lot of, there's a lot of development in this field, also in the Netherlands, of making them actually really beautiful and fit in.
Yeah, exactly.
But for me, the rooftop revolution is just a world where everybody lives in sunshine.
No
naked roof,
but also no fields covered in solar panels. Maybe
I don't think it's necessary to cover fields in solar panel. We have so much space. We have so much unused space. It's a lot of roofs, but it's also along a highway or. Waste or whatever, there's a lot of industrial areas that are hideous. And it's really, there's so much space.
Is there a lot of environmental impact? Because I know there's like major solar farms being built across the African continent and in many places. Is that a problem for the environment, or is that actually...
I'm not sure if that's more... I'm more familiar with like wind energy that could disturb like a local ecosystem. Mm-hmm. I don't think as such that's a big issue, but it's more the flip side that you can develop solar parks in a different way that you actually encourage biodiversity. Right. So there are really nice examples where they have sheep walking around, where they grow all sorts of plants, where actually the solar panels themselves can help some shading or, so there's a really nice way to integrate and to make it multifunctional. So when I say we need to go from a system where we just think about prices and solar being cheap and large, we need to think about what societal value can we actually bring when we install solar.
Yeah, exactly. But we better think about that fast, because indeed the rollout of solar is going at a very rapid speed, as you showed us.
Yes,
this is kind of a very
and we
crucial
have
moment.
we have a massive mountain of waste that's coming our way, that's coming back. We have customers calling us and saying, we got solar with you 10 years ago. I just bought an electric bike or car. The 15 panels fit on my roof. And I want new ones because I've already paid them back financially. So in their mind, it's free. It's free now. It's paid off. So give me new ones because they're twice as efficient, which is true. Because when you bought it 10 years ago, it would be 200 watt peak, whatever that is.
And why is that so
and now
important?
It's 400.
Why is it so important to have? Because of you have to have
people
charge
say,
your
well, we
car,
want to.
so
Yeah, we're now
need more
electrifying
energy.
our economy. So people, and it's all in goodwill and it's all understandable.
Yeah.
They say, look, we want to generate twice as much power. So here are the old ones, but the old ones are less than 10 years old. They work perfectly.
But
so
that means that actually the demand for energy is growing.
it's growing
well
rapidly.
by a lot.
Electricity, because we're going off the gas to electricity. So we're electrifying our economy. There will be a lot of electricity that we're demanding.
Yeah.
And we do need to use solar, of course, to generate all that power. But we also need to be ready for the mountain of solar panels that have been installed 20 years ago or 10 years ago that are coming our way. And that we don't send it abroad. And
But don't you think that there's also something to be done there on the demand side? Like we can't just like continue to grow as much in the energy that we use.
Of course, I mean, ultimate solution is, of course, that we use less energy. So, and I think that's very important. But still, we will
use more.
We will use more because we're weaning off the gas.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that we do it in the right way.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. My last question for now is, I wonder, I mean, you showed us some of the social and environmental risks that are there right now.
Yes.
Do you think there's some hidden risks that will come to us in the future, like environmental or social or anything that we're really not considering right now around the solar revolution?
I don't think the environmental damages are well known. So the nice thing about solar is a solar panel is made of glass, of aluminium, and it's made of silicium, which is essentially sand, a little bit of silver. So they're not a lot of toxic materials, a little bit, but those new generation of solar panels, the ones that I showed a picture of, the circular ones, they don't have any of those toxic materials, and it's also very little. So I think they're well known. It's not like we suddenly will have a big surprise out there. But we have to be mindful, and we have to choose the right products and materials.
Yeah.
So we don't create an unnecessary environmental damage.
Yeah,
but again, and this is with climate change and energy transition, the solutions are there. The technology is there. We just need to apply it.
Yeah. Thank you for that kickoff. Yeah. I wonder if there's already any questions here in the room for Rubiem. If not, we're going to get our next speaker in. And that is Michiel Raaphorst. He's an architect and co-founder of a very prominent firm called V8 Architects in Rotterdam, who they aim to strike a balance between the human needs of the people living in the buildings, but also a sustainable environment. And they were the architects of the Dutch Pavilion at the Expo 2020. So that also caused a big mind shift in the firm, as I understand. And Michiel is going to tell us all about it. Michiel, the floor is yours. Welcome.
7 minutes. There's so much to tell. I will tell this from a personal observation. Doing this project in the Dutch Pavilion has changed my perspective on what an architect should do, how he should behave, and how our office is also changed because of this project. And it has to do, you could say, with deadlines. I'm an architect. Maybe some of you in the audience are designers as well, so we're facing deadlines constantly. But now we, as population, as humankind, we also face a deadline. And the deadline is approaching us very, very, very fast. Today, somebody told me in 1972, there was the first Earth Day. So it was the first moment in history that we realized that we are over-consuming our Earth. It's also my birth year. I'm almost 50 years old. It means that for me now, only the last years, I'm aware of this problem, actually behaving. I'm trying to make a change. So we already lost 45 years. So this perspective of time is really important because I want to tell a story about partnership, about cooperation, about inspiration. The Netherlands Pavilion in Dubai is about uniting water, energy and food. Because only by uniting those three elements, we're able to answer our global challenges. The thing with an expo, or especially Dubai, is that it's a very kind of screaming environment. A lot of pavilions and countries asking for attention, telling their message, shouting their message actually. And what we wanted to do in the Netherlands Pavilion is basically relate to the power of nature. Let people from all over the world understand the power of nature. And do that by using natural phenomena. So we all over the world actually know how condensation works, how photosynthesis works, how the transition from carbon oxide to oxygen works. So we thought we didn't use any language. We're going to use the power of nature to bring on that message. So what we did in Dubai, we created with a lot of people. And one to mention is, of course, Marjan van Oubel, who we invited to use her knowledge of solar energy and to bring on a very poetic message about harvesting the power of the sun. We brought that together in what we call a biotope. So we created this circular system where we were able to harvest, of course, the energy out of the sun, but also to harvest water out of desert air and to grow food in a closed system. And by doing so, letting people understand the power of nature. You see on display how, let's say, these systems work. We even grow food in the middle of this cone-like space. It's a dark space. It's humid because it rains there. It's also cold as a side effect of producing the water out of air. We grow, for instance, mushrooms. Mushrooms are edible, but mushrooms also are the organism which produces a lot of carbon oxide. And of course, that carbon oxide is used by vegetation outside of the cone to grow. That's what you see here in this perspective. So a 3D version of this ecosystem, where in this middle space, where you have the chimney where it rains, on the inside we grow mushrooms, on the outside we grow food, all powered by the sun. A very nice thing to know from this pavilion is that it's not only circular in the way it functions, it links natural phenomena, but also the way it is built. So we rented steel locally, heavy steel, by which we made this, you could say, like a Mad Max machine. And after the expo, which has closed 1.5 months ago, we were able to return that building material to the local building industry. Of course, the funny side is it also saves a lot of money, but also it is a true statement about circularity. Here's an image looking up from the base floor to the top. On the side, you see the raw steel structure, the sheet piles, which they use to create building pits and harbor basins in Dubai. But on the top, you see the beautiful solar panels by Marjan. So this is where I want to address new ways of cooperation. What we did as architects is we took a step back. We didn't define the final image of the building. We invited innovators, artists, entrepreneurs with their first ideas, with their prototypes, to tell a story about water, energy and food. And the beautiful thing is that Marjan came up with this idea about using colors, a smart system to split the light. The part which is used for electricity is harvested, but the part which is necessary for photosynthesis is let through. At the moment we started, this was all an experiment, but we thought that's an expo all about. So we tried, we said we take that step, we step into this adventure together and we develop it. And in time, we found out with a producer that we could make it into an organic foil. So it's an organic PV foil. And what it learned us, and you see these beautiful color reflections on the steel, it's like, we call it a cathedral of steel. It's like stained glass. So it really blends, you could say, the pragmatism and the poetry. It blends nature with technology. Here you see an overview on how the space works at the end, the beautiful light casting in. But we found out it really touched people. People understand the beauty of harvesting solar energy in such a way that it's not a technical addition, but it really is making the atmosphere, it's making the environment. So I already said that we took a step back. We made an open platform for innovators to participate, also in the understanding that we don't want to make a 100% efficient system. We want to make a change because we cannot find the solution. Basically, you could say we caused this problem in 9 generations, from 80-50, the parallel with Al Gore, and now we are forced to solve it in 1 generation. To me, that seems impossible. But what we need to do is to inspire each other and choose direction. And only then we can accelerate. So if we're able to invite all the specialists in our processes, take a step back, that counts for everybody. So you could say, please, Marjan, hack my process as architectural designer, bring in your knowledge, inspire me, and together we create something new. Then you start to accelerate. And in that sense, you could say we also want to change context. So I'm not going to apply ugly solar panels on the facades of my buildings, but I want to integrate them and create something new, a new typology and a new appearance and a new aesthetics to them. So I think I'm through.
Thank you, yeah. Thank you, Michiel. Please join us at the table. Thank you for that. Rui, I'm actually really curious what you hear when you listen to Michiel. What stands out for you?
Yeah, I love this. I come from the other world, and that is just trying to maximize the amount of power. It's always about the efficiency. And whenever we see these beautiful products like Marjan's solar panels, it's like, yeah, but they're not efficient and they're expensive. That's the only line you'll get in my industry. And I love the fact that you do it, but you also make it something that really mesmerizes people. And it reminds me of my first encounter with solar panel 30 years ago. And it was just, I was mesmerized by the power of the sun and the simplicity of the technology. But I love it that you take that a step further and the image on that steel that is just so incredibly beautiful, and the fact that it's all circular. So I can only hope, and that's also one of my questions, if I immediately may, did it actually lead to something? Did it inspire people? Did anybody say, oh, I want this and I'm going to do this as well? What is the result?
No, absolutely. I think in 2 directions. So one side from the technical part, you could say, okay, this is an interesting technology, especially the organic foil. How can we go, let's say, from a startup to a scale up? But maybe also even more from the artistic point of view. So it's recognized as a piece of art, actually. That works also in the Emirates. People love those new things, so they want to embrace it and bring it further. No, it inspired, and I think it inspired through beauty. So first you touch people on beauty, and then you get their attention, and they start asking questions. Oh, so actually you harvest energy out of this.
Then you have them, yeah.
Okay, and this technology, how long is it? How long does it exist? 5 months, 6 months? This is the first prototype, and then you got their attention.
Yeah, so interesting.
That's how it works. And also, what you said, I think it's very important what you're facing. So, this in my industry, the building industry, people want perfect solutions. They apply value engineering. Can we find cheap alternatives? But if you're able to express that we should, as they say, be part of the solution, so choose direction and motivate and inspire each other, that gives much more, powerful solutions than going for the efficient one.
Yeah.
I also refer to the light bulb from Edison. Also the first invention of the World Expo, 1853, I remember. People loved it at that time. There was light, there were no gas explosions anymore. And now we think it's an ugly thing. Ugly because it produces more heat than light, actually. So that is, and we know so much. We have so much knowledge about technology. We always found a reason not to do it instead of doing it. And although
Michiel, I feel there's something you're passionate about. You have a lot to say, which is great. I feel there was something important in your presentation that you didn't really unpack yet, which is this idea of changing context. Can you just share a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's about making new technology also drive a new context or a new appearance. we're saying about, hey, we can make beautiful solar panels now. There are companies who can make solar panels and they look like marble or like wood. I think that's cool. It's already better than what it was 10 years ago. But for me, it's
So you mean literally the context of
unsatisfying.
like what we walk around in?
A new typology, a new appearance which is honest and it belongs to the nature of the technology. So like what Marjan did in the pavilion.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. And that I don't believe in isolated solutions. I don't believe in just putting solar panels only on roofs and only in the green fields. But we have to make them part of the facade, part of our clothing, part of our
context. Yeah.
Exactly.
And another thing I was really curious about, I don't know about you, Rubian, but you emphasize taking a step back in collaborating. So not being like the expert that you always are, but really taking a step back, inviting others in. I'm wondering what that really required of you as a person to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's difficult because as a designer, you feel personally connected to an idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you meet somebody who is inspiring, have a good idea, then you are convinced. It took maybe like a few days to meet a few people, like the other inventor who created this machine to produce water.
Oh, yeah.
I know a little bit about these things, but they're the specialists. So
yeah, so you were
it makes my life, it makes my
inspired. Yeah.
It makes my professional life and my personal life much more interesting.
Way more interesting, yeah. And lastly, steel, isn't that a very unsustainable material, actually?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we thought in the desert you only have sand as a genuine material, you could say. What else do you have? You can ship in wood from Europe, but that's not sustainable at all. But the steel was already there.
Right.
They use it for building pits. So we rented it and now we are returning it.
And you gave it back.
Exactly.
Okay, so that is the sustainable part about it. Yeah. Interesting. Any questions already? Yeah, please. Yeah, there's a mic in the room. Yeah.
Thank you for your talks. I was wondering, because a lot of the emphasis is really on the aesthetics of solar panels, and very important it is to make people fall in love with new technology and want them to integrate it in their lives. But aesthetics also change, and we are constantly developing new, designs for cities, and we're constantly evolving in our aesthetics. Like, I'm sure when concrete was first invented, we all hated it, but now concrete is quite minimal and very attractive. So I was wondering, is like the traditional solar panel, is that really too ugly for a potential future where all of our rooftops are covered in it, or is that too ugly for somewhere like Amsterdam? And how important is that really in the development of solar future?
I think if it's only about technology, there's kind of unlocked potential. You talk about concrete, or I think it's about a material should reflect its function. Of course, its time of origin, but it should also relate to culture. And I think that counts for every material, every product. It's evolution. So also the first solar panel was just bare technology, and now we start to understand that it can be more. It can be an integral part of facades or clothing, and then it becomes interesting. So actually we are kind of a first generation who's becoming aware of the potential of solar energy. So there's no good or bad. I'm just trying to find new possibilities.
The direction that you mentioned, yeah. I would love to invite in our next speaker, our third speaker. His name is Simon Brinksmann. And he founded a startup called Biosphere Solar. And this startup works on hacking the solar industry, raising the bar really, and bringing in new standards on what fair and circular should really mean in this sector. So give him a warm round again, Simon Brinksmann.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, Biosphere Solar. And we talked about it already in Chile, but actually worldwide, we can see exponential growth in the deployment of solar panels, which is great, right? We're solving climate change. But we also already talked on waste. Every graph has its dark side here, you know? We're solving one problem, but we're creating another problem in its wake. And that's, of course, not where we want to go. Because in Europe, yes, we shred it and we put it in concrete. Okay, not so nice. But in the rest of the world, everything just ends up like this. And Rubium just said, oh, maybe it's not such a problem, but I do think that's a problem. Because think about all those valuable materials which we so need for our energy transition, and also some toxic materials, which just end up in our environment and cannot be reused. So we started on a mission with Biosphere Solar. We want to bring fairness and circularity not only to the solar market, but also to the solar industry. Let me show you how. This is what we're working on. We're basically simplifying the design of solar panels by taking away that layer of glue that sticks all of the solar cells together. We're replacing it with a seal. My slide is gone, and there it is again. And we're doing all of that open source, meaning anyone can contribute to the design, but if you make changes, you have to share it. So we're creating an open ecosystem of innovation, and we're of course relying on fair labor. Now, that graph looked great, right? Like exponential growth in solar energy. But let me also show you where we stand. This is the global energy mix, and the yellow line is solar. And if you're now thinking, I can't see the yellow line, me neither. It's very, very small still. And if we have to go to half of the world's energy supply in solar, like Rubium said, that's trillion solar panels, not a million, a billion, that's a trillion solar panels. So we need a new design to get there, because we cannot build a trillion solar panels in this linear way, exploiting people, building it, deploying it, and then trashing it. It's just not sustainable. It's not going to last for more than one generation. So this is how we envision it. Fair labor, the solar panel gets built. Once it breaks, anyone can take it back to their factories and repair it because it's open source. Everyone knows how to repair it and how to upgrade it and how to recycle it. Because we talked about recyclable solar panels, right? But circularity is so much more than just recycling. You know, we want to be able to repair it. We want to refurbish it. We want to upgrade it. And that's why we are also changing the inner works, not just the way that we encapsulate the solar panel, but also the way that we click the cells together. And what's cool about that is that suddenly the whole production line becomes much simpler, because here in a traditional solar factory, you need these huge machines that cost millions of euros, stringers and laminators. But actually with a easily demountable, dismountable design, you can also more easily mount it. We don't need soldering anymore. It's just robots clicking it together. So that is how we want to reach our vision. Not like, oh yeah, there is a fair solar panel, but that's just a more expensive one somewhere in the market. No, fairness should be the norm, right? So who is we? Well, we are still a small team, mostly centered in Delft, focusing on the engineering, the project lead, but because we're open source, we're currently building a global community. And that's how we aim to stand up against the big players in the solar industry, because everyone can start contributing to the design. So we have a global R&D department. And then, of course, not to mention our partners who give invaluable input. So we have currently built these 3 prototypes, and we're moving in this year to a minimum viable product, a product that we think is ready for the solar industry to implement. But that's just the beginning of the journey, and also there's still a lot of questions there. Some of them are technical questions, very important, but also something I would like to talk about here is the aesthetics of it, the design. Because it would be so sad if all these solar panels in the world start becoming circular, but it's a silent revolution. And the only way you can see that it starts getting circular is by looking up a number online. No, you want to walk in the street, and you want to be able to say, oh, look, there's another roof with circular solar panels. How cool. But how will you recognize them? It's a big question for us. If you have ideas, please get in touch. And so, yeah, this is our journey. This year, we're doing an MVP. Then we want to go towards a production line, piloting the production line, showing the industry it's possible, finding partners who want to produce this, and slowly scaling up. But also mentioned before, not just more expensive solar panels that are fair, but also finding a design that is cheaper and available for global markets. And that is how we aim to disrupt the solar industry. And I like to end on this thought. Because, you know, with the whole climate change conundrum, there's really two ways it can go, right? Either we solve this thing and the world will be a solar utopia. And in that case, you would want your solar panels to be repairable, right? Because we have created all this infrastructure and we want to keep that going. So the solar panels should be able to be taken apart. But on the other hand, there's also the dark future that we all have in the back of our minds. Like, ooh, what if we don't manage? You know, this deadline is approaching fast. Well, we'll see global supply chains breaking down. It's COVID like times 100. And then you're sitting there in your house and there's no more parts, you know, you can't get anything anymore. But luckily your electricity is still running until it breaks. But then you just take down your solar panel, take out the broken part, maybe replace it if you still have something laying around, put it up again and keep running your electricity. So whatever the future, I think this will be something useful.
Wow. Thank you so much. Simon, please join us. Very excited by your vision, actually, in your presentation. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah. And maybe, Ruby and Michiel, how do you want to respond? Like, what's the most burning thought right now?
No, I mean, this. You asked me earlier, what's the ultimate solution? This is the ultimate solution. You know, we do need raw materials, but we want to get them once and reuse them indefinitely, and this is the way to go. I do wonder, because I've visited a few factories of Exasun and of Solarge. Have you visited those factories? And is there an open, like we all want not to stay away from the black side of your last slide. So how is the relationship with other Dutch companies that are trying to do the same? Are they sharing? Can you learn from each other? And what makes you think that what is your idea of your product and how does it relate to the products that are already there?
Yeah, well, actually Exasun and Solarge both have been great. You know, in industry, there's often this idea of patenting, keeping everything to yourself, becoming rich off it. And of course, Solarge and Exasun work with patents, but they've also been very, very helpful. We started as a student project, and when we approached them, they were always like, yes, sure, you know. I'm actually having a call with Jan Jaap next week.
Insiders.
He's from Exasun, yeah. And we're going to look at our process, and he's going to help us out a little bit.
And he's a big producer of like current solar panels.
Yeah, of aesthetic building integrated solar panels.
Right.
And what's cool about it is that you can take the glue apart. They have a secret process to take the glue apart, and then you could actually refurbish it or recycle it.
A secret process. I don't want anybody to know.
No, they developed it together with DSM, a big chemical company, and of course, you know, if you put so much investment in it, then you don't want other people to immediately be able to copy it. So I get the patenting mindset, but for us, we're a small group and we try to be big by working with the world. Yeah. So that's why we go open source.
Michiel, what's really standing out for you from all of this?
I think the proof was in one of these slides where you had this comparison between the old version and the new version, and the new version is just using less material, less layering, and I think that's growing up of the solar panel, being smarter, better understanding itself. So I think the proof is already there.
Yeah, exciting.
And about that patenting, I mean, you talk about open source. I think we all talk about open source here. I think that you have to also challenge these DSM. We have to challenge the elephants.
Yeah.
Challenge the elephants.
They also have an obligation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the emphasis of the circular, that it also goes together with what you touched upon, and that's the aesthetic part of it. And to your question, I do believe that in the future, the solar panels that I'm selling with my company will be like the asbestos of this century, and that everything we touch will have solar integrated, that it becomes just invisible. Or it becomes visible. It becomes a piece of art. It becomes something
you want to have around you in your context.
So,
I want to ask you, Simon, because you talked about your vision is to change the whole industry, And your strategy is partly to make it open source, so everybody can adopt it, to have this global R&D department to find like also a way to make it cheap and beautiful at the same time, hopefully. But what else do you think you need to really, because that doesn't automatically mean that the industry is going to then actually maybe adopt it. Maybe where do you need help maybe from other parties?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for asking. I actually forgot to mention that in the last slide, but we have our website up, biosphere.solar, and there right now we are uploading our documentation, basically a tutorial on how to build this solar panel. And I think what we need most right now is people who say, oh, cool, I'm going to build it myself, but I'm going to improve it, you know? I'm going to give my own flavor to it, my own hack, and then share that hack, because we want to develop not alone, we want to develop with people.
Yeah.
So right now, I think that is one of the main things we need.
And then when you build that community, you also get more visibility, hopefully, more awareness, more buzz, more...
Exactly,
Yeah.
and then it starts to live amongst the people. And I'm always a little bit afraid, because even though, yes, the current solar design is not as sustainable as it could be, it's still 20 times more sustainable as coal from a CO2 perspective. So I don't want to say, oh, don't do solar, right? Like, definitely go for solar right now. But like Rubium said, choose the recyclable solar panels from SolarEdge or Ecocentric that are already out there. But of course, the vision is, in the end, all of them should be circular.
Yeah. And another question on my mind is, we spoke a lot now about this circularity aspect, the environmental, but you also mentioned it has to be fair, obviously, the way it's produced.
Yeah.
What are your ideas around that? How to make it fair and socially sustainable and not exploitative?
It's tough. I mean, of course, we have Fairphone here in Amsterdam, which has done a lot in that respect, and we've also gotten in contact with them on how to do it. In the solar panel world, I guess the main components of the product matter, where you get them from. Cells, obviously, we have the problem with the Uyghurs in Western China, which are getting exploited for polysilicon. And for that, we are trying to work with fair suppliers, preferably European suppliers, but the European market is still in its infancy. Glass is another big one. We've found actually a European glass supplier which can help us. And I'm not saying Europe is by definition better, but it's more local for us, and the regulations are stricter, so that really helps. I think an under-mentioned thing is tin, because it's used to solder solar panels, and actually a big part of the tin supply chain originates in West Papua, where people are actually being suppressed, and that's something you never really hear, and I wonder why.
Yeah, well, and also the way you speak about it. Of course, we have the issues in China, and I think there's a lot of awareness actually really lacking, right, among a lot of us. And indeed, as you say, it's so many supply chains that need to be transparent and that need to, be a lot more equal. And what do you think, for people who actually don't know that much, what are the top 2 or 3 things we really need to be aware of? Everybody, please know this is happening.
Wow. I mean, I totally understand that you can't be aware of everything, because there's so much information out there today, and it would be so nice if it's just, like I mentioned, one easy thing where you can recognize and you can trust that this is something fair. I think the most important thing for people to be aware of is reduce.
Yeah.
It's not just about clean energy. It's also about, like we say, less energy, and not just the energy you use, but what you consume. Go to Kringloop. There's so much. Don't always buy new stuff.
Yeah.
So reduce the amount you use, and what you still use, try to do it in a sustainable way.
Yeah, reduce, reuse, recycle. Any questions from you guys? Humans. Yeah.
I heard the mention that at the Dubai Expo it was organic solar cells. Could you explain? All the materials grow?
Actually, you have to ask Marianne precisely about it, but she found it's a German producer, I think, and it's in foil. It's organic foil.
Foil on the panels.
Yeah, between the glass. So
Right.
it's fixed by glass panels, but it's an organic foil and still smart because it splits the rays of the sun. And yes, it's not 100% efficient, but I think this invention was already so cool that when we started, it didn't exist, and then in this 3-year time, we found this new product. So
Yeah, when
but don't ask me the details because Marianne knows better.
when we say organic, I think it refers to the organic chemistry. So it's a different type of molecule. I'm looking at my business partner here because she did a science background. And
Yeah, I actually spoke.
Wait, the microphone is coming to you.
I don't have the exact details, but I actually spoke to someone from the company that is doing this last week, and their name is I always forget. Helicox or something like this, and it's about it's organic materials, but I don't know which ones. They're not.
an organic molecule is carbon.
Carbon based,
Yeah.
instead of silicon.
Yeah. The downside, obviously, like Rubia mentioned, also is lower efficiency, higher price because it's an emerging technology. And it's really a question that we should be asking ourselves. Is efficiency really important? We focus on efficiency because we want to target the industry, and the industry finds that really important. But also, I think there's something to say for it, because if the panel is more efficient, it will produce more energy, so you need less panels for the same amount of energy. If it's less efficient, that means you have to produce even more. So that also makes it less sustainable.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm so glad you got back into this, because this was going to be one of my questions. Because we mentioned that we don't want 100% efficiency, and yet we also have a deadline coming up, and we have climate change that is knocking on our door, burning our house down. And I'm just wondering, what are the trade-offs that you see? Where do we stand? And should we really be saying, no, we don't want 100% efficiency? Do we have time for that? What are your thoughts on that?
And just to recap this a little bit, because I don't think everybody, well, maybe everyone here, but everybody watching understands what we're talking about. Efficiency as in like get as much energy out of the thing as we can, versus other considerations like the material that we use, how recyclable is it, how beautiful is it. So it's kind of, you're asking, how do you see that trade-off between as much energy as we can and all those other considerations?
And maybe to put numbers on that,
Mm-hmm.
the organic foil has an efficiency of about 7.5%, whilst a solar panel...
What does that mean?
The efficiency of taking the sunlight and turning it into electricity, basically. And to compare it to a conventional solar panel, that's 23% right now. So it's much less.
Okay, so the beautiful ones are like 3 times less efficient.
And 3 times more expensive also.
And 3 times more expensive.
Unfortunately.
At this moment.
Yeah, at this
Right.
moment. But that's I think ultimately the solution will be like a conventional solar panel consists of so many different materials, and it's so unclear to trace where what comes from and who has been involved in that whole process. And I think there was the Silicon Valley Toxic Alliance, and they started on every single solar panel producer score. They had like 10 different scores about human rights and about all the societal parts, the CO2 content, etc. Not beauty, not aesthetics yet. But I think a starting point would be to build in Europe some kind of a scorecard where you look at the other societal values and damages. And then if we start doing that, then products like yours will be much more competitive than from the others. And ultimately, the Chinese and the big producers will start looking at all these criteria and think, well, it's no longer acceptable to sell our solar panels to Europe because they don't accept it. And I think that creates more level playing field for the ones that are just fairer solar. Then we haven't tackled the aesthetics yet, but that's also a matter of skill. It's often you see these technologies like the solar roof, the solar roofs. I've heard for 20 years about integrated solar roofs, and Elon Musk had a go, but it's still not really there. But it will come, and once there will be tipping point, because if enough people ask for it, there's a demand, and it will become cheaper.
Would be an interesting policy requirement, though. It has to be circular, it has to be organic, and it has to be beautiful.
And in France, they had the aesthetic. They had a subsidy for building integrated solar. So they're really much more advanced because the government
is pushing for it. Yeah. What
But
do you want to say?
no, it's not so much about aesthetics. It's much more about culture. So we should talk about solar culture rather than solar technology.
What do you mean by that?
by meaning it becomes a daily part of our life. What I say about our clothing, about our buildings, about everything we do. And that then we can relate to it, and then we can appreciate it. And then I'm pretty sure that a panel which is a little bit less efficient, but which we can appreciate and understand the same way as a building is made out of brick or a building is made out of steel, a building is made out of a very genuine, honest solar technology, then it's sustainable.
Yeah, it becomes about quality as well in that sense. I also want to understand one thing a little bit better. This environmental aspect of also the organic materials. In my mind, that translates to, when we discard the solar panel, maybe organic is better in the environment when it goes back. Is it about that, or what is this about? And together with that, what you said, the difference between what Rubiem said and what you said about solar panels being discarded at all, is that a bad thing? Or solar panels in the environment, how do we relate to that? It's two questions in one. What does the organic have to do with anything, and the solar panels in the environment?
I don't know enough about it to be able to say the organic solar panels are. I have the feeling that they are less.
But why does it need to be an
polluting?
organic material and not sand? Why is it better? Or does anyone? You don't have to answer all the questions. Like whoever knows, she knows. Someone in the audience knows.
So I think that solar panels that use organic dyes, they're basically an extra layer that basically should increase the efficiency of the charge that's being transferred between the solar light and the technology. So you still have the silicon in it. It's just basically an extra step. So there are other solar panels.
But you're saying it helps the efficiency. It helps to get more power out.
In theory, that's one thing that they're looking into. However, I think organic dyes are also quite unstable. So over a short amount of time, they degrade. And so the lifetime of these solar panels also
are shorter.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then if you ask like the second part of the question, basically what is the problem with these solar panels ending up in the environment? And some of it is I guess not that problematic, this silicon part of it. So glass is made of silicon, and the solar cells, the crystal is made of silicon, which is the material sand is made of. So that's, I guess, not very problematic, but it's about the other things. So there's first of all the critical materials, and they're called critical for a reason. They are critical because we need them to power our society, right? And those are just getting lost. And the silicon in the solar cells especially, it's 9N purity. That means 1 in a billion molecules is impure. So it's very, very high purity, and that is what chips are made of, semiconductors. So that is a very, very important material for a digital society that needs to be returned, because we cannot always keep
and not just thrown
mining
out.
it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then there is the toxic materials. Lead is being phased out nowadays, luckily, because we know that it's very toxic. But there's also still materials used like PFAS, which it's called the forever chemical because it just never degrades. When it ends in the environment, it's persistent. It just stays.
Yeah. Do you want to react to this, OBM, or?
No. I mean, it's just again. I like your notion of taking a step back. And when you take a step back and you think, why is this? Why have we come to this place? Why have we been so blind to be dependent now entirely on China, on one country, for all these raw materials? And why are we throwing away the valuable parts and we're recycling the unvaluable parts? And then if you take a step back, unfortunately, it's then always regulation, because the European Union has a regulation that you have to recycle, but it goes by weight. So they're recycling the most heavy stuff, not the most valuable stuff. Like not those rare materials that you mean. There's a beautiful program, the Waarde van de Aarde, the value of the earth, that Twan Huis made, that actually shows in solar panels also how dependent we've become and how silly we are to throw those valuable materials away. But it's a mistake, unfortunately, in the system. If we don't fix that system, then we'll unfortunately probably have to live very long with this. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for this part of the conversation, all three of you. Unfortunately, we're going to have to say bye to Michiel and Simon for now, because we still have our time to ask more questions. So give them a warm round. Very interesting. And I would love to introduce our last speaker already, and that's Hendrick Grieving, and he's a designer at the Next Nature Network. And he's initiated many projects like the Pyramid of Technology, Reproductopia, and he's currently working on a checklist for technology privilege that we're going to hear more about. Take it away, Hendrick Jan.
Thank you. Do we have visuals? Yes. Every human on the planet has to deal with technological change. Although not all humans have equal access to those technologies or the knowledge to integrate them in their lives. So how are we going to make our solar future, our solar culture, more fair and more just? My name is Hendrick Grieving. I'm a designer at Next Nature Network. And through experiences in my life and traveling, I've been fascinated by this idea of technology and privilege. If I would have to give you a definition for now, technology privilege would be something like any unearned advantage of one species over another achieved through technology or amplified by technology. In species, I'd like to see in the broadest sense of the word. Humans, non-humans, more than humans. Let's include everything for now. I was asked to tell something about techno-privilege for this night, and I think, well, I've heard already a lot of very interesting ideas tonight that resonate with the idea. So it's difficult to build on that, but I'll give it a try. So I'm curious if exists something like solar privilege. So I've put together like 10 observations through this lens of technology privilege that I want to share with you tonight. I think for me, the most important notion is that we have to acknowledge that nobody owns the sun, right? The sun is just this celestial body, and it's our sun, but there are like billions other suns and billions other galaxies we don't know of. There's so much vast amount of energy in the universe, and we happen to be in this tiny planet that's just close enough and just far enough from the sun so that we're able to harness this energy. But if we put infrastructures in between that harness the energy and distribute it, and we have to make choices to where it goes, it becomes immediately very political and also very ecologically challenging. So I think this may be the most important thing. We also have to be aware that any vision that we bring into this, any way that we think about our future solar cultures, we always bring our own the hopes and fears of the time we live in. You see it in this image, this retro future image of this happy 50s couple in this, solar powered car. We always bring in our own ideas. And of course, we also have to include the environment. Think about the environment. That's what we're here for today. But do we also actually include other visions? Often when we talk about technology, it's a very wide conversation, very Western conversation. Are we ready to also include other perspectives, and not only other cultural perspective, but also more than human perspectives? Here you see a huge solar power plant in a desert in California, I believe it was. And what this does, all these mirrors, they reflect the solar light. What they also do is they char insects and birds in mid-flight. So this is not exactly the environmental solution that we're all hoping for. It's also kind of a bird killing machine. And this may be a little bit anecdotal example, but I think it gives a direction that we have to think about, our co-inhabitants on this planet, and are we going to include them in our solar cultures, solar futures as well? We have to think about diversity. This is the flag of the solar punk movement, but next to a solar punk movement, we maybe also need solar romantics, solar hippies, what have you. And we have to be very aware that anything, any future that we dream up, any utopia might turn into somebody else's dystopia. So who gets to decide that? Who is on the steering wheel of imagination? I also believe that any decision we make in the present will resonate with billions of people who are yet to be born. And generations after us, we can't ask them for their opinion. So we have to invent practices that are multi-generational and take this into account. And for me, this also makes this a very deeply spiritual journey. We are in a universe that everything is about energy. We are energy ourselves. We are created through this universal energy. And we cannot leave that dimension out of it, I believe. So I want to end with this quote by William Gibson. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So maybe we can find practices to distribute the future a little bit more evenly. How are we going to do this? I don't know. But today I just hope to give you a lens. That's the lens of technology privilege. And right here, right now, where we sit here, or behind wherever you're watching this, you can check in with yourself before we make decisions on an ecological scale or political dimension. You can check in with yourself. Where resides my technology privilege, and how can I use this for the good? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hendrik Jan. Please join us here as well. Rubiem, what do you think?
Yes, I mean, I'm just blown away today in general tonight because I so live this sector, the traditional part of it, and I'm hearing so many dimensions that when I saw the title of your presentation, I thought it was going to be more about the energy poverty that we talk about. And energy poverty are the people who just cannot live, or they spend more than a quarter of their income on the energy bill. They can't pay their energy bill, and there's massive energy poverty also in the Netherlands now, especially with the higher energy prices. And the other dimension of it is just the developing countries that, there's access to energy problem. I don't know the latest statistics, but is it one out of 3 or something people in the world don't have access to modern energy? And so I know about these technology privilege or injustice, but from the traditional discussion and the traditional vision. And we try to solve it by distributing the existing technology a bit more evenly. And I'm just touched by the dimension that you brought to me. And I think it's very beautiful. So I don't have a question for you. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, very nice words. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I do have so many questions, however.
Thank God.
Yeah, you said some really beautiful things, and let's just go one by one. One thing you said is important is to, include diverse non-Western visions on the solar revolution that we want. What do you think, having researched that more maybe than us, what do you think are some of the elements that are really important to mention?
Well, I think we're here in a room with a lot of solar experts, and I'm not. So I'm just offering this perspective of technology privilege. Mm-hmm. But that's something I'm very aware of wherever I come. I roam around in both the technology world, the design world, the art world. But specifically technology, I feel is often very much imagined through this white Western lens. So
so if we look at through the other lenses that are manifold in the world, what do you think is important to highlight? Some of the things that stuck with you.
You mean examples or projects?
Yeah, examples of alternative ingredients of this technology vision.
Well, there's in Amsterdam there's this festival Other Futures, and they're doing exactly that. They're showing futures, kind of not necessarily science fiction, but future visions from non-Western perspectives, from all over the world.
Maybe I'm kind of digging for then examples of what those perspectives could be or what those visions could entail that make it different from our mainstream here.
Well, doing research for this presentation, I have to confess that I just did in the past days because I was looking to what are the examples within the field of solar, and I came across this documentary. It's called Drexia, which one still is in the movie. I haven't yet fully watched it, but you see kind of people. I'm not sure. It was in somewhere in the African continent, but I don't know which country.
Looked like a Ghanaian name.
Yeah.
Ghana, yeah.
Yeah. You see these people walking around in some kind of almost like shamanic clothing with this like transparent, translucent solar device or something. I think, and that's already kind of, I mean, that also says something about me, like my perception or like the image that I'm used to, and exposing yourself to these like new visions and just other.
Yeah.
I'm careful not to say the word other too much, but seeing people with like not my culture or not my skin color dealing with those technologies, I think that's a starting point, and that's, I think we have to actively search for those perspectives.
Yeah, and related to that, you spoke about, who's at the steering wheel of imagination. I think that's beautifully put. Someone's utopia can be someone else's dystopia. And I think we're not aware of that at all. Often, we're envisioning these grand futures, and we're just like trying to rush to meet our deadlines, our like world deadlines of climate change and all. How do you think we can become more mindful of who is actually at the steering wheel, and how can we make more space at the steering wheel?
Well, I think first of all, designers are doing this. Designers create all these visions, and the visions are maybe not always the most cost efficient or the most energy efficient, but they're expanding our imagination, and artists do as well. And I think by creating more visions, making sure that we have something to choose from, that already kind of breaks a little bit down the existing powers of like big companies.
Yeah.
Foucault also talks about power as ones who are able to steer that imagination.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important notion in any field, but also in this field. Yeah.
And maybe it also requires the same quality that Michiel was speaking about earlier, of just like take a step back, make some space.
Yeah, exactly. Have a little bit of a wider perspective.
Yeah.
It's also the transparency, because if you talk about utopia, we're all trying to solve the climate problem, and we're driving our electric cars, and we have our solar panels, and we have like all this technology that is accessible to us. And people are blind to the dystopia part of it, and that's where the materials come from, and that's the people, that modern slavery. I heard lately that somebody told me that there's more people now, modern slaves, than there used to be when slavery was existing in the old days, which is shocking. And so that was also something that went through my mind, that utopia and dystopia. But the problem also from exposing that too much, you get this negative. You feed the critics and say, look, this whole utopia of yours is actually really bad, so let's just keep doing what we're doing. And that's something.
That's again a matter of perspective. Yes. Because indeed, like the people on one side are maybe blind to it. I'm sure the people who are experiencing it are not.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why it's important to start. I love that perspective, because we need to resolve. We need to make sure that the utopia doesn't have that dark side. And I believe it's possible. To do that. Yeah.
I also have a question about utopia. Can I?
Sure,
because something that you said earlier resonated a little bit with me, and you said something around the lines of that the ultimate solution would be to cut down on our energy use, and that is, I believe, something I disagree with, and I think that's also interesting in terms of imagination. What kind of solar utopia do we envision? Because I don't think that cutting on energy should be the end game. Energy is anywhere. Energy is abundant. Anything we do as humans, eat, shit, poop, make love, everything costs energy. So if we cut down on that, I believe we cut something very essential to what it means to be alive. So I would say, can we reverse that narrative and think more in an abundant way about our use of energy, and make that a very beautiful and rich future, and steer all the energy of all the people in the room today towards that future?
I think that energy, yes, the positive energy to create a beautiful utopia. I think in the large term, in the long term, I think you're probably even right. Utopia could be reality if everything we touch, as I said, generates solar panels power. You know, every building, every street, every piece of clothes. Maybe we don't need to cut back, and I don't think we need to cut back. We have enough space, we have enough materials to do that. But I think that's a long way, and I think in the interim we might be practical for us to to save a little energies.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we don't support some crazy wars. So that's a different.
A bit of sufficiency in our culture. Yeah.
No, but that's what I mean. That I think it's very important to think about. Yeah, of course, there's not that much time. There's this deadline, but I think it's always important to have like a very long-term vision in the back of your hand. That also the short-term vision should support that longer vision. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I am going to round off this part of the discussion before we go into our question round to Hendrik Jan and to all the other speakers. But I'm going to say goodbye to those watching from at home. Thank you so much for following the discussion. It was really rich, I felt it was very insightful. We spoke about so many interesting developments and solutions in the space, solar relating to the environment in this case. So, you know, about the cradle to cradle design that's necessary, about developments that keep in mind biodiversity, as you mentioned, but also material choices that we spoke about, being really mindful of, you know, whatever we put in it and how we put it together, making it open source. Also having the requirements, as you brought up a couple of times, in terms of the policy and what do we accept actually, and how do we regulate, and what do we ask from the sector, from the government, and also maybe as consumers of all that energy, what do we really find important in this, and how can we enjoy this new context that we are creating together and imagining together. In that, who is actually imagining it? Is it everyone, or is it just the lucky few who get to use their privilege, their technology privilege, to shape a certain future that might already be here but not equally distributed, as you said. So thank you so much, all of you, for this conversation. Thank you again for joining us, and please check out the agenda at deswijger.nl for all types of other programming, and also, of course, our last in the series of 4 on the 30th of June, and that will be about the spatial aspect of the solar revolution. And then after that, September, October, there will be many Solar Biennale activities that are going to be really exciting and insightful to join as well. These programs are always free at Podcast De Zwijger, but if you want to support, then you might see a QR code when we round off, and that you can scan that and become a member and be a supporter of all these insightful, interesting, important conversations. So thank you, and see you next time.